Okay, this video is how to align a cartridge on a Sony PS-X800 Biotracer straight line tracking turntable. And the first thing that I need to discuss is the alignment protractor that we're going to be using. You can make one by getting an old record, and you get a metal straight edge, a good quality one that's obviously straight. And we lay it on the record so it precisely intersects the spindle hole of the record. And then we'll go ahead and scribe a line with a needle so we have a nice fine straight line that precisely intersects the spindle hole in the record. Okay, once we have that, we'll go ahead and put it on the turntable, and we'll rotate the alignment protractor record so that this line is as parallel as possible with this facet at the rear of the turntable. And we do that just by eye. We don't need to fool around measuring that or anything. That won't do us any good anyway. So once we get that as close to parallel as possible, then we'll go ahead and power up, and we'll make sure that our arm goes through the auto zero balance procedure and the LED is now off after being on. We'll reduce our tracking force. I mean, this cartridge normally runs at 1.5 grams. We'll drop it down to half just to minimize any trauma on the cantilever of the cartridge as we're doing this. And next thing that we'll do is we'll go ahead and left cue the arm to the lead-in groove set down point and drop the cartridge. Okay, we'll take our flashlight and we'll view from the side to see how much overhang or underhang we have relative to the scribe line. And so we just eyeball it and just get an approximate idea right now as to whether we have an overhang or underhang condition and how much we have. Okay, next thing we do is we'll left cue all the way near the label, and we'll do the same thing. Cue down, have a look at it with the flashlight, check to see whether we have overhang or underhang and how much of it. Okay, and our objective is to have the same amount of overhang or underhang, or if we're lucky, the stylus precisely intersecting the scribe line at both the periphery and near the label. Again, what's important here at this point is that we have the same amount of overhang or underhang at both near the label as well as at the periphery. Those two conditions need to be identical. All right, we don't want any dissimilarities there. If we do have a dissimilarity, then what we need to do is we need to cue up and rotate the record in the proper direction so we eliminate that difference between what's going on near the label and what's going on near the periphery of the record. So it should be obvious, but I'll state it anyway. If, for example, we have an overhang condition at the periphery and it comes down on the scribe line, or an underhang condition near the label, then obviously we're rotated too far clockwise. Okay, we have a condition like this. I'm exaggerating it, but you get the point. So what we need to do is we need to, of course, you need to be cued up. You don't want to back cue and traumatize the cantilever. But we'll go ahead and rotate the record again as many times as we have to make sure that we have identical overhang or underhang conditions near the label as well as at the periphery. Okay, and we do that as many times as necessary by cueing the arm to check that. Once we get that correct and it's identical both near the label and at the periphery, then we can proceed to go ahead and align the cartridge. So let's say we have an overhang condition at both the periphery as well as at the label. then obviously we need to slide the cartridge back in this direction to get the stylus to intersect precisely our scribed line here. Okay, so that's what's important. We're trying to get that stylus to drop down right on top of that scribed line, not only at the periphery, but near the label as well. Once we do that, we have perfect alignment. Okay? Now, we see a lot of specs for overhang. We'll see 49 millimeter and 50 millimeter, etc. That you're supposed to measure the stylus to mounting flange dimension, and then you call it a day. I don't believe in that. In my opinion, there's too many ways for errors to creep in there, and this is the proper and correct and best way to get your overhang correct. All right? So let's do it right the first time, be done with it. Everybody's got old records that they can scribe a line through and not feel bad about. Let's do it. Let's do this right. Okay, so I'm not even going to discuss the way to measure with a vernier caliper the stylus tip to the mounting flange. I just think that's stupid. Okay, so anyway, once we get that right, then we need to go ahead and we'll clip that and gently remove this cartridge and head shell. Okay, and we need to make sure, I don't know if I'm holding it in the right place or whatever, but we need to make sure, of course, that the cartridge longitudinal axis coincides with the longitudinal axis of the head shell. Okay, so we don't want it canted one way or another. That's going to produce tracking error, and we don't want that. So the cartridge has to be nice and parallel with the sides of the head shell. Okay, so this particular cartridge is pretty darn straight. Let me see if I can get that. You may or may not be seeing that very well, but anyway, you get the point. So that needs to be correct too, as well as, of course, what we just went through with our overhang alignment. Make sure your screws are tight. Now, this is an aftermarket Audio-Technica head shell. I wish I had a genuine Sony PS-X800 head shell, but I don't. And the reason why I would like to have one to show you is that the Sony PS-X800 head shell has a very similar clamp bar like this, and if you over tighten it, you can break these things right here. All right, we don't want to do that. So we want to get a practical, reasonable, rational torque on these screws without overdoing it. Okay, you break that clamp, you just can't get another one anywhere, and that head shell is pretty much you know, it's going to be in your spare parts box after that. Okay, so once this is correct, we go ahead and put it back on and tighten it up. Be reasonable with that torque. And the next thing we want to do is we're going to look at the lateral balancing procedure. A lot of the instructions for straight line tracking turntables say just put a level on it. So here's a nice high resolution Spirit bullseye bubble level, and you know, they say put it on the mat and just get it level. Well, that doesn't work very well. Admittedly, the Sony PS-X800 and PSX555ES owner's manual describes a different procedure, but even that, I think, is a little bit you know, wanting in its thoroughness. So what I'm going to show you how to do is the proper way to laterally balance these things. It's a bit involved, but if you want to get these things right and get them to really sing, this is how you have to do it. Okay, so what we're going to do here, but before I get into that, let me discuss one more thing. And I'm going to pull this headshell cartridge combo back off again one more time. Okay. Just set up my gram scale here. And you, by the way, you should have an electronic gram scale. If you don't, you need to get one. Alright. Now we're going to weigh this. What we have is 14.2 grams showing up there. Alright. If this thing is anything I'm sorry, not a thing. I talk too much slang half the time. But anyway, if your headshell cartridge combo is anything greater than 17 grams, then you're going to have to use an auxiliary counterweight. Okay, this is what they look like. This is the original Sony auxiliary counterweight. All right, and it screws into the back of the tone arm. Okay, so since we're A-OK here, we're not exceeding that 17 gram maximum limitation, then we don't need to use that. Matter of fact, we should not use it. If we do, it won't auto zero balance. So you only use that if you're exceeding 17 grams, and then you got to use their finer counterweight. There's two different thicknesses. If you exceed 23 grams, then you're going to need the thick counterweight. Okay, so we're A-OK. We don't need that auxiliary counterweight, so let's keep on moving and go on into the lateral balance procedure. Okay, again, forget this. This is not going to get our left-right lateral balance correct. It will help us, and we do need it to get the fore and aft. Okay, the fore and aft leveling correct. All right. So, but we don't use this for the left-right lateral balancing. Okay. All right. What we do is we're going to go ahead and cue this arm over. Let's put a record on here, just so it's a little bit more clear. Okay, so we're going to cue this over to the approximate center of the record playing grooves. Not the exact center, the approximate's good enough. Okay, now at that point we're going to go ahead and power down. Okay, and I need to discuss the type of weights we're going to use. I like these thumb screws. Thumb nuts, okay, not screws, thumb nuts, okay, they're brass, and we want to use a non-ferrous material for this, because if we were to use a ferrous material, steel for example, and it drops, especially on moving coil cartridges, that weight will get sucked into the cantilever and raise utter hell with that cantilever, and we don't want that. Okay, so brass is a high density material. It's great for weights, and it's absolutely non-ferrous and totally safe. Okay, so we want to use brass. All right. So what we're going to do is very gently apply these weights onto the head shell, and you might want to put your finger, if you have a finger lift on your head shell, which most SLT tables don't and really shouldn't have that on there, but this particular one from this customer does. That'll help you to maintain some safety. Okay, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the arm to float, you know, in the regular way that other turntables go through a zero balance zero balancing procedure just prior to setting the tracking force. So with this design, the Biotracer electronics applies vertical force downwards when it's powered up. Okay, when it's powered off, then the arm's natural condition with its distribution of mass is such that it raises the arm all the way against its upstop. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is weight it so it brings it down away from its upstop, so the arm is free to move left and right. That's our objective. Okay, so let's put a little bit more weight. Oop, too much. Okay, let's try this. Oop, too much. That. Too much. Let's take this little nut off. Too much. Let's put this back a little bit further. Still too much. Okay, we can't go back any further on this head shell or we'll slide off. So that's about all we can go there. And I don't like to put these weights this far back. I prefer to stay up in this area here and not go back any further than about here. Okay, so obviously this is too heavy. So let's see what we can do here.